They're getting more realistic though, and sometimes I want more of a not cartoon, but like it looks like it's an artwork, but they have options.
Over the weekend, my son's like, hey, I want to create some images. Like, can we use AI to do that? Can we use ChatGPT to do them?
So I created a worksheet instead of having them write a bio, which can be very daunting to an artist. I had it help me create questions for them to answer. And then I also have a very detailed prompt for the AIs.
Bring it back to real world here, gives them the exact formula and format of how it needs to be structured and how it needs to be done versus just assuming that they've figured it out. And I see this all the time when there's people that are teaching things in general. There's a lot on the big picture. Here's what you need to go do. Okay, I've been meaning to ask you on the topic of AI, what is your favorite AI tool to be using right now as it sits today?
Ooh, this is good because I'm kind of in the middle of switching. So my go-to is always ChatGPT and still is primarily what I use, but I'm exploring what Gemini has to offer and just getting into that a little bit. But I would say right now, GPT.
Paid version or free?
I'm still on the free version, believe it or not.
Have you taken advantage of I think at least at time of this recording, I believe Google's been offering it's like a month or something like that of Gemini Pro for free to test out. Have you tested that at all?
I've only done the one that I just went to the Gemini app and used it, but I do have a G Suite. So is it included with G Suite or?
I'm not sure if it is. I would take a look at it because they're paid versus free on most of these models. You're going to get access to a couple different things and setup wise and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool. I've been playing a lot with, obviously ChatGPT is still kind of my go-to chat bot at this point. I've been playing around with Gemini a bit more. I have a free trial going on for the paid version, so I'm playing around with that. I do have a paid version for ChatGPT, and I'll use Claude and Perplexity from time to time as well, depending on what I'm working on, what I'm doing. But outside of chatbots, any other AI tools that you've had the pleasure to play around with and have some fun with?
Yes, as a graphic designer, I do a lot with my company with those skill sets. So Adobe Firefly has been great. Yeah, I really enjoy that. They're getting more realistic though, and sometimes I want more of a not cartoon, but like it looks like it's an artwork, but they have options. So I'm kind of diving into their updates. But I would say Firefly has some really high quality imagery.
Oh, that's cool. I have not had a chance to play with that one yet. Definitely on my list. I played with a bunch of other stuff, but over the weekend, I'll give you a quick story and then we'll jump into the reason why we're talking AI today. But over the weekend, my son's like, hey, I want to create some images. Like, can we use AI to do that? Can we use ChatGPT to do that? I'm like, sure, I suppose. So he, gave me this long description, all that kind of stuff to put into a custom GPT on within ChatGPT, and it created these characters for him that were very realistic and all that kind of stuff. I'm blown away with how good some of this image creation is. And then fun fact, if you have not heard of it, Google it's called Flow. It might be Flow something, but it's their video generation tool that you can kind of access in the pro version of the Gemini. And so we played with that too. I'm like, all right, I'm going to take these images or this description of this image, and I'm going to now have Google essentially, or Gemini essentially, create a video, a little short, 8-second clip, and brought those characters to life, which was just insane to see how that works.
That is so cool. A friend of mine was showing me some things he was doing for a music release. So he was creating, it was like aliens dancing at a dance party, and he was using that to promote his music. And I thought that was really clever because he really could fine tune how the aliens looked, what they were doing, where they were. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was fun to see how he started with one idea and it led to the final product.
Yeah. It's really neat. And, the reason I asked this question, we kind of start off the conversation today on this topic is clearly AI is not going away, right? I love having a bit of a conversation on this, but as business owners and entrepreneurs, especially if you're not necessarily in the marketing or agency space or different things like that, where this is probably talked about a little bit more, how do we use it? For your everyday business, what is the best way to use AI? What's the best way to use a ChatGPT or some of these other kind of commonplace tools? And how do I maximize it and get the most out of it and get the best responses from it? So that's really what I wanted to talk about today, because one of the big lessons that I've learned and I've done a bunch of research on is you've got to treat it almost as if it's a junior team member on your team, which means we got to go through the same process as we do when we bring on any team member. We need to understand what it is that we want them to do. We've got to train them on the system and the outputs that we want and ensure that we get the end result and kind of teach it and train it along the way. So I wanted to kind of bring this conversation today to bring kind of those two worlds together. How do we bring this tried and true team training methodology and delegation methodology and pair it with all these amazing AI tools? And really, they shouldn't be separate. They should be about the same.
Yes, I agree with you there. I think that's such a great way to framework everything when it comes to AI, because AI can be kind of daunting. It's like, how do I communicate with this thing? But it is really intuitive, and yeah, you just treat it. I treat mine like it's kind of my receptionist a little bit, especially writing documents, even writing emails. A lot of times now I'm going in there and getting email ideas for like how to respond to certain things, and then adding, of course, my own voice tone or my own thoughts to it. But yeah, I think you're totally right. It's just like training a team member and preparing that team member to understand the business and learn and grow.
So let's break this down, because I think this is going to be really, really fun. Like I said, I've played around with a lot of it, so hopefully even you've got some questions that pop up that I'm sure the audience will as well. So ask away. But everything starts with a kind of full, honest self-assessment. What is on our plates that we need to be able to delegate, right? Whether it's an actual person or we're using AI or AI tool, we first have to take a step back and go, well, what are all the things that I do and what can be delegated first? What are some things that are maybe kind of lower skill, or they're more repetitive type tasks that just take me way too long and I'm not getting to the other things? So the question becomes, what do I do better than anyone else, and what is repeatable and teachable? With AI can't, at least not yet, truly replace unique judgment and leadership type stuff, but it can do the replicate the repetitive work. There we go. There's the word I'm trying to get out of my mouth here. But all of those repetitive things, it can do those types of things. So if we start by listing those out, what are all those things that we're doing? Then we can start to circle or highlight and decide, these are the ones that I want to hand off to somebody else, or I want to hand off to my chatbot, or I want to hand off to an AI automation tool, or whatever it is. We have to start there.
Definitely. I think that's huge at looking at what's that repeatable thing, or those things that are maybe holding you back from where your time can be allocated elsewhere. Example was, emails, social media posts. Like, a lot of times I'm like, I don't know what to post. And so I use the intelligence, especially on a specific thread, to come up with these creative things that give me, like, it helps me cut down on the thinking time. Same with emails. Sometimes I'm just stumped on a response, like whether it be a client or however. Sometimes just having that inspiration, have it write an outline, and then you can then go in and be like, oh, okay, I would take this out, I would do that. But yeah, those tasks, like a lot of the admin stuff is like where I find a lot of help.
Yeah, so this is a really good point. And I think this is, if there's one major thing that, if I could like take on in my head and give to the audience, it's understanding that this is where we have to go first. What are the buckets of tasks that we need to delegate, and then essentially create a specific instructions for an AI or a team member even that's for that individual bucket. So instead of saying, I need it to just do all these things on my plate, it's what are all the things that an admin can do? Because if I'm going to go hire an admin, there's very specific things that an admin is going to do. An admin's not going to be an expert Facebook marketing specialist, but they can be very good at inbox management, calendar management, all of those sorts of things. So we have to bucket them first, just like if I was going to write a job description for everything that this individual would be doing, that's like step number one. And it's crucial to think about this versus just having a catch-all and saying, I need you to do everything. Like, Nobody can do that, including AI. And I mean that because there's so many different ways to think about things. So that's really step one. Whether you're hiring a team member or you're using AI, you've got to break it off into what is the specific bucket of things that I need it to do, and really what is that role. Then we start to build and figure out what the delegation looks like to leverage that individual or that tool. So you said you're on the free version of ChatGPT. And I don't know this because I'm on the paid version. Do you have access to projects?
I do not. I do everything just in the basic, like start a prompt, and then I kind of keep them in their own like file, and then I build on that. It's kind of like a project, but I don't have projects specifically.
Okay. So I know it's in the paid version, and I don't know if in the future it's going to be any different or things like that. But in the current iteration of the paid version, they have this thing called projects. And projects, look like individual folders with chat threads in between each one or in each of the individual folders. Now, why this is really cool, and I started to figure out like what's the best way to use this project thing. And instead of it just being a folder tool, it's really a specialization tool. So I probably have like 12 to 15 different projects in my ChatGPT account now. One is a Facebook specialist. One is a podcast specialist. One is a YouTube specialist. One is a productivity specialist. And I just like go down the list because what I can do is I can create very specific instructions for each of them. So if I'm going to post content, or I'm going to have ChatGPT create content for me on Facebook versus LinkedIn, traditionally they're different audiences, different feel, different everything on the platform. So I want that folder, that project, to be a specialist on that specific platform so that everything it writes is for that specific platform. So it becomes a specialist in the area. Or if I want really focused on being a writing expert, so that I can refine some writing skills, then that's what that should be. It's really no different than what we should do in our team, right? I want to have a Facebook specialist. I want to have a admin specialist. I want to have a someone that only understands the editing side of maybe video editing or something else like that, right? We would hire for these roles. So it's the same basic principle. So that's really step one, is breaking it into what are the very specific things so that we can train them as if they're that individual specialist. And of course, it can pull the knowledge from internet and everything that's been trained on to become the specialist in that one specific area.
That is really cool. Now I'm getting excited about the paid version. I might have to check that out because that just that creates that a little bit level or another level deeper than what I've been doing, which has been serving me pretty well. But just to have the specialist, almost like trained in protocols is so much more convenient, and I think it makes it easier to communicate with your AI because it's expecting that kind of information, whether it be admin or whatever.
Yeah. So think about it this way. So I'm going to it's been easy to kind of think about it from the marketing perspective, but here's another like very quick use case. All this is going to dovetail into like the rest of how do we train an AI tool like this to be what we need them to be. But imagine just creating a specific project that is for proposal writing. So in your business, I need to write a proposal for every single potential client that I want to work with, and I've got to write a proposal every single time. Well, imagine giving a clear set of instructions saying that my target audience is traditionally this, and these are the pain points that they always hit, and these are the things that need to be in the proposal, and here's how that needs to be laid out, and here's my pricing structure, and like all the different details that if you had somebody sitting next to you and you're going to teach them what it looks like to write a proposal for you, you're going to write out all of those instructions, put it into custom instructions for that project. Then you take like 3 or 4 of your past proposals that you've built as PDFs and you attach them as files. So it has reference points to know exactly what that's going to look like. Now, when you go in and you create a new chat thread in that project and say, hey, I'm working on project for prospect A, and these are some of the scope things that we're looking for. Here's the things that we talked about. By the way, here's the notes of our conversation, because a transcription tool from Zoom or wherever else be a great way to layer in some additional knowledge and notes in there. Now, when you ask it to create the proposal or start to outline and have it ask you some clarifying questions, it's going to write the entire proposal for you in a way that you know is going to be at the level that you would expect from a professionally trained person on your team.
Definitely. Ooh, this gets me really excited because I'm thinking about all the different projects that I could potentially use this for and really stay organized. I would say it's a great organizational tool, and it is like you're talking to that person and they know exactly what you're talking about. You don't have to search for anything. It's all right there, and everything is really like organized.
Yeah. All right, so that was really step one and the start of step two, right? First, we got to figure out what are the things that need to come off the plate, and then we can start to prioritize which of the things we're going to create projects for or train our AI junior team member to do alongside of us. And then we start to work on kind of the delegation thing. So start by handing off these simple tasks that can take, that traditionally take you 30 minutes or more per week, that you can start to get some of that time back. It's really good to start thinking of AI as a smart assistant who's fast but needs a little bit of clarity, so we can kind of help them through that process. Things like summarizing transcripts of meetings, drafting email replies before you actually get to them, so then it saves you a little bit of time, right? Maybe doesn't completely do the full thing, but starting to get a little bit better. Organizing messy notes into clear bulleted checklists. The video we did last week, right, was on specific pain points or challenges that some of our clients faced in Q2. Well, one of the things I used ChatGPT for before we sat down and recorded that episode was I took a photo of a whole bunch of sticky notes up on a wall, and I gave that image to ChatGPT and said, hey, read all of the text on these sticky notes, organize them into categories and list them out for me, and then let's start to analyze that together, right? I didn't have to have somebody sitting next to me that I said, hey, you're my admin, I need you to take this photo and I need you to type out a list of everything. It did it for me in seconds. So little things like that are probably the first things to start using, just to free up some of that time and the momentum within the business to be a little bit more effective.
I really like that. I think there's some things I want to tweak in how I'm using AI to create more efficiency and get the organizational tool is huge. That is so huge because I am a more creative person, and a lot of entrepreneurs, we have our so many hats that we're wearing. And so this can be one way to just take that off your plate as well and know that everything is in its place. And then you can just pick the project you want to work on and talk to that AI.
Yeah. And listen, for all of you that are watching this or listening to it later on, there's 100+ different use cases and things that we can use AI for. And if you're a small business owner that's sitting here going, yeah, but I haven't really done anything with it yet, I don't know if it's really for me, I don't really want to learn that stuff, I think this, just using simple chatbots and understanding how to train them so that they can start doing some things alongside you as a business partner is probably the easiest first place to start. And then you can start looking at how do we implement this later on, because it's not going away, right? We have to learn this next thing. So that comes to, all right, we're starting to move some things off. We've defined some things, but now we need to define what it is that actually needs to be done. So I've got this that I'm now going to delegate off to this specialist AI tool or AI chat thread that I've created. Defining what needs to be done or having like really, really clear instructions is important. So kind of some of the things that popped in my mind as I was kind of preparing for this conversation. First one is vague prompts equals vague results. Mm-hmm. So I literally heard this on another podcast this morning. I loved it, and I'm going to share it with everyone today. And this is a gentleman that teaches on some AI type things, and he'd go into a crowd and he'd ask everyone to raise their hand. So they'd raise their hand, and then he'd be like, okay, great. Now raise your hand as high as you possibly can. And they'd go all the way up and raise it as high as they can. And then he asked the question, well, why didn't you do that the first time?
Right.
It wasn't the clear instructions, right? And that's kind of how you can think of AI. Like it's interpreting what you're saying in a certain way. The clearer you can make the defined outcome, the closer to the actual result that you want or the desired result, the closer you'll get to that.
That's a great analogy. I could apply that to many things, I feel like. That's really cool.
Yeah. So a couple other examples just for the audience to kind of see how this works, or what's an example of a good prompt versus a bad prompt. And I don't even know if I would call this like a really great prompt, but it gives you the idea. So a bad iteration is going to the ChatGPT or a Gemini or Claude or any of the other ones out there and saying, hey, write a business post for me. Okay, great. Versus, hey, write a 3-paragraph LinkedIn post that sounds like me in my own voice. It should be about overcoming fear in entrepreneurship, and it should include one personal story, one insight, and let's make sure there's a call to action or follow for more business growth tips. Very different results of what you're going to get.
100%.
So
100%.
how you prompt it, or the clarity there really, really matters. Have you been playing with the prompting a bit and seeing different results based on that with the experience that you've had using the tools?
Yes, actually, this brings to mind one thing I've been doing recently is I offer a free workshop for my artists, for my DJs, to help them write their bio. And I there's a couple layers to this. So I created a worksheet instead of having them write a bio, which can be very daunting to an artist. I had it help me create questions for them to answer. And then I
Mm.
also have a very detailed prompt for the AI. So when they take all of that information and put it in AI with the prompt, which tells them, make me a 250 word bio that sounds like me, that integrates these questions, that is going to catch the eye of event promoters, venue owners, and managers, and get really detailed like that. And having that there, they read their bios to me and they were like, this is incredible. They were immediately floored and they got so much out of that. And I said, y'all, this is something you can take into your music. You can take this into your, like, anything you need to write. And I think even more so than just the bio, they received skills on how to run their AI in a way that's authentic to them and that isn't daunting and scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something else I think you I think was stated in there that kind of leads into the next piece of this. And anyone who's ever hired team members or has worked with team members, and had team members below them that they've managed in the past, one of the biggest things that's ever taught in management is be sure that they understand what the instructions were, or what the intended outcome is. And the best way to do that is ask it questions. So don't just assume that a team member or an AI tool just completely understands what the first pass that you said. Ask it to confirm. Ask it to restate or summarize what you just said. Confirm that it's on the right path before you give it permission to continue moving forward. So one of my favorite things to do is, hey, before writing, can you summarize this and ask me a couple follow-up questions so that you better understand what the outcome is, or even asking a simple question like, what assumptions are you making about this task? And let it come up with the answers, because you'll start to see what the reasoning model is and you can help guide it in the right direction. So just the simple thing of, what questions do I need to ask it for me to give it more information so it knows what to do next?
You're spot on. Yes, that's very similar to the questions I give my artists are all questions that I asked AI for what it needed to help to write a proper bio. Like, what should I ask them? And there's like 10 or 11 questions on there. And creating that, the more content you can give it, the more direction you can give it, the better the results and the more authentic the results are going to be.
Yeah. So hopefully y'all are seeing the theme that if you were going to bring a new person into your world, a new team member, somebody else like that, even an intern, whatever it is, you're going to have them sit next to you and you're going to guide them through the process of, like, here's how we do things in our business. Here's the things I want you to go work on. Here's what the intended outcome is. Here's how that works. Here's how to access the system. Here's how to, like, all of those training things that you would do with a team member. And most of us intuitively get that because we've all been trained in some way, shape, or form in our journeys. If you take that same mindset and apply it to how do I interact with my AI tools, you will get a 10 or potentially even a 100x better result, because you're actually taking the steps to treat it as it was designed to be worked with.
100%. And yes, another thing too, just keep messing with it. Keep talking to it. Keep testing it. Like, and the more you work with it, the more refined your skills in working with it and communicating with it are going to be. And you're going to see that as you grow, as you become more equipped with working with your AI.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we've talked about defining what needs to be done. We've talked about being sure that they or the AI tool understands what it is that needs to be done. It can be often important to go through explaining why, sometimes the context of the reasoning why, right? I'm not just looking to create bios, but I'm looking to create bios for artists because they're going off into this next stage of their journey, and here's some of the things that they're working through, and it's really important that we have this set up for that reason. Like, that you give that additional context and we might get two very different outputs if it understands why or what's the intent behind working with these types of things. So, some examples on that, I like to give a couple examples. If you're going to go type something into the chat prompts and see what that looks like. Let's say we're creating a blog post or something like that. Being able to type in, this blog post is for stressed out small business owners who feel overwhelmed with hiring. I want it to feel encouraging and practical. It's a little bit more of a why. Or, this is for a webinar landing page where we really want to get people excited to sign up. These are just little statements you can throw in the prompt to help it understand the context of why you're asking it to do the things you're asking it to do.
Definitely. Yes. The clarity is the key to success with AI, and talking to it like you would an employee or someone that you're working with.
All right, so define what needs to be done. Be sure they understand what it is that needs to be done. Explain the why. Then we look at teaching it how. So we talked about what, but we didn't talk about how. So teach it how it needs to be done. So don't just tell them what to do, show them how. This is where using examples, using templates, using formatting instructions, giving it examples of previous work, things like that, and saying, hey, I want you to follow this exact structure, gives the tool, or even a team member, again, bring it back to real world here, gives them the exact formula and format of how it needs to be structured and how it needs to be done versus just assuming that they've figured it out. And I see this all the time when there's people that are teaching things in general. There's a lot on the big picture. Here's what you need to go do, but there's a gap in the here's how to actually go do that. So make sure if you can give it at least a little bit of instructions. Here's the format. I want you to use a hook. I want you to have 3 main pain points, and I want you to use a call to action. Here's a blog post that I used that I really, really enjoyed to read, and I want you to follow that exact same framework. Things like that really help with the closing the gap between the what and the how.
Definitely.
Then really the final 2 pieces of this here is being sure that they understood the process, and then what does the completion format look like? In a human world with a team member, it's probably defining when something needs to get done. Now we're working with an AI tool, so you're going to hit enter and it's going to basically it's going to run it right then and there. So what does that completion format look like? But understanding the process, I think this goes back to a little bit of what we talked about before, but have it outline the process first before completely going through the task. Have it ask clarifying questions. Encourage it to take a step-by-step approach so it doesn't get confused in too many different tasks at once. And then defining what done looks like. What does the, give me a 100-word summary in bulleted format is something you can tell them, like, this is what done looks like, and have it go through that process. So if we bring all that together here, define what needs to be done, be sure they know what needs to be completed, explain why it needs to be done, teach the how, and then be sure they understand the process and know what complete looks like.
That sounds like a 5 steps to success. And that is, especially with AI, when it can be daunting, these are great. I'm excited to give them a try and even refine and shift how I use AI.
Yeah. There's so many different ways that you can use it that would be absolutely amazing for most of the small business owners out there, taking a step back and saying, okay, if I was to bring on a junior team member, but I don't have the money to actually do that, but I can invest $20 a month to have a plus version or whatever it is for ChatGPT, and I can give it some of this same instruction and have it at least take 50% of the work that I would hand off to somebody else off my plate. That's net a positive thing. And that's an easy way for a lot of our listeners to just get started with consistently using the tools that are now available to us.
Definitely. I love this. So insightful and so practical too. So these are great tips and tricks that you can take into any day.
Awesome. Well, if you're still here at the end listening to this, comment below. I'd love to hear, what's your favorite AI tool that you're using today? Are you a chatbot person? Are you using that in conjunction with other tools? Share with us below. What's your favorite one? What's the one that you've been using the most? And for those of you that want to take this to the next level, want to understand, how do I implement some of this in my business? How do I start to delegate certain tasks off my plate? Then I'm going to encourage you to take advantage of the 2 weeks of free coaching. We'll put the link below. It's sponsored by Action Coach here. It's a great way to get started, understand the perspective that a business coach brings into your business, and allows you to start implementing some of the things that we talked about here in the conversation.
Yes, definitely can't wait to hear your thoughts on AI. And any questions you have, feel free to drop those in the chat too. We'd be happy to answer.